Okay, so I make it about 25 to, and we're going to get started. Again, use the questions app on the right-hand side of your screen. That's that side, and we will try and answer your questions as we're going through. If anyone has any questions that they want to ask offline later on, you can always email any of us. Again, there's myself, Jim Smell, e-learning fellow from the Faculty of Health. We have Pete Lonsdale from the School of Nursing Midwifery. We have Matthew West from the Learning Professional Development Centre, and Jonathan Knight from KLE IT Services. So we're going to get started. I'm going to show you my screen, and we're going to go straight into BlackBoard. I've set up a dummy module here for us to have a look at and to have a play around with, and we're going to start out by covering the basics of defining really what tests and surveys are. Tests and surveys are tools inside BlackBoard, which is the product we use to provide you the KLE, and really they're a way of retrieving responses from your students. So a test is a way of providing questions to your students which allows you to provide correct answers. So you can mark which questions are correct, and that then allows you to use scoring, and also it allows you to see the responses from each individual student. A survey is exactly the same as a test, but it doesn't allow you to provide a correct answer. There are no correct answers in a survey usually, but it also anonymizes the responses. So when you go in to see the responses from a survey, you will not be able to see Tim said this, Pete said that. You will just see person 1 said this, person 2 said that. Both Tim and Pete have completed the survey. The only other section in here is that we'll show you is a pool. A pool is an area where you can group questions that you have created that you can reuse later on. We're not going to be going into them in any detail today, but it's just to let you know what a pool is. So we're going to start with creating and editing your test or survey and inputting the questions in there. So once you've arrived inside your module, you will see on the left-hand side that you have a course management section to your left-hand menu, and you have a course tools section. Inside here you'll find that you have tests, surveys and pools. Selecting this will take you into the menu where you can decide if it's a test you're going to be creating, a survey, or going into the pools section. So I'm going to start out with tests, and in here you can see that I have created 2 tests already. One called a class reset test, which has been deployed, so it's been made available to the students, and one which is called demo 1, which hasn't been deployed to the students. It's just inside this area here for members of staff to see. We have 2 buttons at the top here. We have build test and import test. We'll be covering the import later on. So we're going to have a look at building a test. The first thing that you need to do when you click build is provide the test name. You can edit these later on, but if you know the definitive title now, it's best just to enter it here. Here you can provide a description and instructions to your student. There are options to display these to your students later on, and you should include into the description what this test is about. Is it a formative? Is it a summative test? Maybe things like when they'll be expected to undertake it. Instructions. This is a good place to put into there what the student is expected to do. Are they expected to answer every single question? Will the questions be shown in a randomized order? And very simple things like that. Once you click submit, you have technically created your test. Unfortunately, it's a test with no questions inside it, so nobody's going to be able to do anything when they come to the test. So we need to start writing questions inside here. We have these three buttons here that allow you to create new questions, reuse questions from a pool, and upload questions. This is a new function of Blackboard, and we're not going to go into this uploading questions just yet. We're going to stick with the traditional creating them from inside Blackboard. So under Create Questions, you have a list here of question types that you can use, and we're going to pick out a few of the most commonly used ones. So the most commonly used ones tend to be the either or, the essay, the fill in multiple blanks or fill in blank singular, the multiple answer, multiple choice, and then the short answer type here. The true false I won't go into because it's the same as the either or, it's just limiting it down to just using true or false, but that is available through the either or. So I'll start out with the either or. We're just going to select that question type, and the page will reload. We have two boxes at the top here. We have a question title and a question text. The title is only for staff really, so that when you're looking at these later on, instead of having to read the full question, which the question text could be quite long, it's a very short, easy way for you to understand what the question was about. Once you've entered your title, you can enter the question text. You have the full WYSIWYG editor here, which stands for what you see is what you get. And you can place into here images, you can place in attached files, you can insert recording from your webcam. You do need to take into consideration how this test will be run. If it's in an exam setting, say over in the IT suite, then it might not be appropriate to place videos up there, especially if they've got audio, unless you're instructing the students to bring headphones, etc. with you. So keep them as simple as possible. Sorry, we're in an either or, so is blue a colour, and we're going to say that we want our answers shown in a vertical orientation. You can choose a horizontal if you prefer, and then you select the types of choices that are available to them. Is this a yes/no question? Is this an agree or disagree statement, right or wrong? Or, like I said earlier, it allows you to select the true or false. When you select any of these, you will get the correct answer indicator. So at the moment we've got yes or no. Obviously yes is the correct answer. If I change this to a right or wrong, I'm just waiting for the page to refresh, you can see here that the correct answer changes from a right to wrong statement here. So I'll say right. We then have the option of providing feedback, and this is a great way, especially in informal tests, self-tests, of giving the students some information as to where they went wrong, or in this case, because this is the correct response feedback, that they have given them some positive reinforcement. It's not necessary to fill these in, especially if you're doing a summative exam. It may be that you're not providing feedback through this method, but actually providing feedback in another format. You do have the correct response feedback up here, so the feedback they get when they answer the question correctly, and an incorrect response feedback, which is the feedback they get when they obviously answer the question incorrectly. We have some categories and keywords down here, which again are an advanced function that relate to pools, and we're not going to really cover those today. And you have an instructor's notes section at the bottom. This is an area where you can make notes for staff to see. They're never displayed to the student. Instructor notes could be rationale for which is the correct answer, but it could also be when you're doing essay type questions, you could put notes into here as to what type of answer accrues what type of score. Once you've filled in all of that, you can choose to submit your question or submit and create another if you're creating more questions of the same type. So I'm just going to click submit because we're going to look at another question type now. And you can see here that we now have question 1 inside our test, which we called demo test for webinar. You can see here that there's a little green indicator telling us the correct answer is right. We've got the question text there, but the question title is displayed up there as well. Now, once you get to loads of these, you can actually hide the question details so that you just have very short snippets of the questions up there, and you'll see that in greater effect when we've added a few more questions. So I'm going to have a look at fill in the blank next, sorry, essay type questions next. So when you select essay, again the page will refresh and you're displayed with something that's very similar to the either or question type. So you have a question title, and you have, instead of the option of selecting the yes, no, the right, wrong, you have down here the ability to enter an answer, and this is an example answer that you could provide to the students depending on the settings afterwards. So again, if it's a formative test, if they're doing a self-test, it might be that you want to provide to the students an example answer to say, well, this would have been a full scoring answer. With essay types, you can attach rubrics. Again, not something that we're covering in this session because we're looking really at the basics of getting you started. There is great help on this provided by BlackBoard, but also you can talk to any of the presenters or request maybe that we look at doing a more advanced session later on. Again, not looking at the categories or keywords. You can see an essay question is very, very simple to set up. It literally only requires a question text. Clicking submit will put that through. And we now have questions 1 and question 2. The next one I'll have a look at is the multiple choice question. The difference between multiple choice and multiple answer tends to confuse people. Multiple answer allows you to say, select all of the following which are correct, and multiple choice allows you to select the correct answer from the following. So multiple answer, the user, the student, can select 2, 3, 4 answers as being correct, whereas multiple choice, they can only choose one. Now, that's not to say that using a multiple answer, there could only be one of them that is the correct answer, but they could select multiples, whereas multiple choice, they can only select the one. So I'm just going to have a look at multiple choice here. Again, the page will reload. Again, it asks for a title and some question text. Below this, you have the answer numbering. So you have the ability to select here if you want your answers to be A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, Roman numerals. The A, B, C can be upper or lowercase, or you can just leave it without a numbering option. Again, you can select your orientation. My recommendation is vertical is much better, especially with multiple choice and multiple answers. And we start to get into some of the scoring options as well here, and you can allow partial credit. So if we were running this, if we were running this test very, very close to midnight, and somebody selected Friday, you could say, well, give them 50% of the score because it's very nearly Friday. You can also choose to select to show the answers in a random order. So if I were to, at the moment, fill in the answers, answer number 1 is Monday, answer number 2 is Tuesday, etc. But if I selected the show answers in random order, then when the user comes to complete the test, it wouldn't show them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, unless they randomly got that order. It would show them maybe Tuesday, Monday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday. You have the option at the top here of the answers section to select the number of answers that the students will get. One of the confusing things about this is that you can't go down. At the moment I've selected 4. What if I want 3? If I select 10, wait for the page to refresh. At the moment there were 4 answer boxes on this page here. Now it's refreshed. Just loading up. There are now 10 answer boxes on this page. You think, oh, no, I didn't want 10. Oh, hold on. There's nothing lower. This really confuses a lot of people. It's the remove button over here on the right-hand side that you use to shrink the numbers down. Unfortunately, it is a slow process of doing that if, like me, you make the mistake of selecting 10. So I'm just going to reduce it down to 7. Waiting for the page to reload. There we go. So we've got 7 text boxes now, 7 answers, and I'm just going to very, very quickly fill these in. And because today is Thursday, we're going to select this option here, which is the correct answer indicator. It tells you at the top here, correct. So we're going to say here that Thursday is correct. Because we haven't turned on partial credit, we don't get the extra box here, but if I turn this on, you can see under each one they get a partial credit percentage. And this is a percentage of the total score that's available for this question, and we'll talk about scoring in a moment. Again, at the bottom you get the feedback, categories, keywords, and instructor's notes. So I'm just submitting this back through to the test. So you can see here we now have questions 1, 2, and 3. If you end up with these in the wrong order, you can very easily, with most things in BlackBoard, on the left-hand side here, just grab and drag, and you can just reorder these questions. Or if you want to insert questions in between, say I wanted to insert one between 2 and 3, I can just use this plus button here just to select and create a new question from there. On the right-hand side here, we have the points that are available for each of these. By default, BlackBoard assumes you want to assign 10 points to each question. This is particularly useful if you're using partial credits for some of your questions, because you can say, well, it's worth 50%, therefore they get 5 points. But if you're not using partial credits, you may actually just want to change all of these to 1 point. There's a very easy way of doing that at the top here. You can just select all, enter in a new points value, and click update. And that will go through when the page refreshes and update the points on all of these questions here to 1. If you wish to change them individually, say for example this question was worth more points, you can just place your cursor, click into that box there, and just change the number of points that are available for it. Extra credit option here allows you to place questions in that will take the total score above 100%. It's not something that we typically do, or certainly I've not seen being used in the university before. So we're going to submit there, and there we have 2 1-pointers and 1 2-pointer question. Do any of the other presenters, do you want me to look at any of the other question types in detail?
No, I think those are the basics that you've covered, Tim. I think the other ones are, it's a case of trying out what the different options look like, and as you've shown, it's very easy to set up a sample test. So once you've created a test like this, nobody else can see it until it's actually been deployed, which I'm sure you're going to get to in a couple of minutes, Tim. So you're free to just experiment and have a look at what the different question types look like before making your final choice.
Yeah.
Perhaps one thing to mention is, of course, the ones which are paragraph or large amounts of text, you will have to manually mark those, whereas the ones which are simple yes/no answers, of course, are automatically marked, so it's a lot less work.
Yeah, that's very good to point out, actually. Essay questions and short answer questions do not self-mark. They are a manual process. So if you're doing a test which you want to have it completely mark itself, you do need to use you know, multiple choice, multiple answer, things like that. Do fill in the blanks still allow for marking?
I don't know. Do you want me to go and find out while you're doing something else?
No, it doesn't. Sorry, fill in the blanks do. We can see here that there is the ability to say if it's an exact match or partial match. But everybody I have spoken to that has tried to use this, where it does try to mark it for you, has said it is very, very flaky, especially if your students get spelling mistakes wrong. If you've selected a partial match and they use a inflected, such as I'm trying to think of an example, hypo instead of hyper, then there is a chance that it might mark it as correct because it's a close match to the word that you've put in there as the answer. So you do need to be very, very careful of having textual responses automatically marked where it is available. The best thing to do really is, if you want anything automatically marked, go for the options where it is a click to enter option. Okay, so moving on, we're going to look at reusing questions from other tests. So this is the only part that I'm going to go into about pools. The option up here to reuse questions, you can go to the Find Questions section here. This will open up a new window which allows you to look at other pools, tests that have questions in them. So if I go to the class reset, and this will bring up all of the questions in that test, and it allows you to select as many as you like and bring them into your test. So I'm going to bring in 2 questions here, and when the page refreshes, we can see that we now have questions 4 and 5 that have been brought in. They have their correct answer indicators and they're ready to go. Again, we can just reorder those if they were in the wrong position and just set the test up. If I go back out and just show you how to come back in to re-edit, so using the course management toolbar, we're going to go to Tests, Surveys and Pools, then go into Tests. Now that you've created your test, you'll see it in the list of tests here, so Demo Test for Webinar, and we have a drop-down menu for this where we can go into Edit. This is going to take us back in. If you need to edit the test title or description or instructions, you can do that from the drop-down menu right up here next to the title for your test. There's a drop-down and you can go to Edit up here, and this takes you back to the screen for editing the title, description and instructions. So we're now going to assume that your test is fully complete and it's ready to be deployed to the students. You can do this deployment as far in advance as you like. Just because you've deployed a test, depending on the settings you use, doesn't automatically make it available to the students. So I'm going to go to a content area, which I have on the left-hand side here. And I've already deployed one test, but we're going to deploy the new test that we've just created. So I'm going to go to Assessments and select Test. Now you'll remember that when we went to, into the course management, we went to Tests, Surveys and Pools. We had 3 tests in there. We had the reset test, the demo one, and the demo test for webinar. In the list of existing tests here, you can only see 2 of them. That's because you can only deploy each test in one area once. So if you need to deploy the test 2 or 3 times, what you're actually going to need is to duplicate that test, and we'll show you that with exporting the test to another module a bit later on. So you only see the tests that have yet to be deployed, so we're going to select Demo Test for Webinar and click Submit.
That's a really easy one to miss, especially on modules where there is team teaching. So I've had a number of people say to me, why can they not see the test they're expecting to deploy in that list? But it is simply because somebody else has already deployed it in another area in that module.
Yeah. Just because we've got a few new videos that joined us since the start, I'll just reiterate. If you want to ask us a question, there is the questions bar on the right-hand side of your screen with a green button saying Ask a New Question. We will try and answer your questions as soon as we see them, but you'll probably experience about a minute and a half delay because it takes a while to come through to us and then go back to you watching on the live streams. So we're now inside our test options. You can see that it's brought through the name of the test, and we can see here that there's a box for the content link description, where you can again describe to the students what this test is and when they'll be expected to take it. You can say if you want the test to open in a new window. This can sometimes cause difficulties, especially with pop-up blockers. The usual recommendation is to say no, do not open this in a new window. If you have a specific need for opening it in a new window, you might want to make sure that you test it out fully and give good instructions to your students on dealing with pop-up blockers, and probably recommend using Google Chrome so that they're on a standardized browser. Under section 2 here, you have make the link available. By default, this is set to no. If this is set to no, regardless of any other settings you have, the students will not be able to start this test. They will not even be able to see the link. The students to be able to see the test, dependent on the following settings later on, this one needs to be set to yes. So I'm going to set this to yes now. The next option is for an announcement for the test. This announcement is sent out to the students on the display after date and time. So it doesn't go out to them straight away. It goes out to them on the display after date and time if this is obviously set. Multiple attempts. This is usually for formative tests. It allows you to say to the students they can attempt this test unlimited number of times, or they can attempt it a predefined number of times. Forced completion, again, is another setting that we have had difficulties with. What forced completion says is that once a student has entered a test and has started it, if they leave that test, that's it, it's done and dusted, they can't come back into it. The reason we've had difficulty with this is that if their computer falls over, crashes, and you say to them, oh, well, just go back into it and start, carry on, they can't. Because they've left it, it's been forced completed, and that's it, it's been submitted for them. They can't try to continue it. The better methodology of doing this is to set a timer for the duration of the test, and this timer is unique to the person starting the test. So if 2 people sat next to each other started 30 seconds apart, they would finish 30 seconds apart. Turn the auto submit on. What this does is 60 minutes after the student starts the test, whether or not they're still inside the test, if their computer crashes and they don't come back in, doesn't matter. 60 minutes after they've started, their test will automatically be submitted for them. And this is the best method of doing this. Again, you can define any number of minutes that you like inside there, and just set the auto submit to the on at the bottom. We have the standard display after and until. It works the same as adaptive release. And I'll set these just to some arbitrary dates and times. And you then have the option of setting a password. Passwords are very useful if you're running this as an attended summative exam. So if you're expecting your students to attend to an IT suite and you want to make sure that only those inside the IT suite are completing the test, and a student isn't trying to complete this test sat at home with all their textbooks open in front of them, you can set a very, very simple password, and therefore at the start of the exam you can say to the students, okay, click into the exam. When everybody's ready, the password is happy, and then once they enter the password, they can start the exam. Anybody outside of the exam room who doesn't have the password can therefore not undertake the exam. I'll come back up to test availability exceptions in a second. We have a due date down here. This is usually useful for formative exams, where you can say to the students, this is you are due to complete this test before this due date and time. It actually populates several other fields inside the student's Blackboard environment, where it reminds them that they've got to go and do these things before the due date and time. But you can also say that they cannot start the test if the due date has passed. So if you wanted to say to the students that they must start the test before 9:30, but they have up until 12 o'clock to actually complete it, depending on the time limit set up here, you could actually select the option to say that they cannot start it after and set the due date and time to 9:30. It's only a reminder, but the ability to stop them starting it after 9:30 means that only those that have started it, if their computer crashes, they can still go back into it, but nobody new can start it after 9:30. We come down to the options here to include the test into the grade center calculations. Now, if you're trying to withhold the grade from the students until you've gone in and had your exam board, for example, you need to deselect this option, and you need to deselect the options down here to show the scores to the student. We'll also need to show you how to hide the column in the grade center, and we'll come on to that very shortly. If you do want to show them to the students because it's a formative exam, you can select this option up here, which goes into a calculation if you want it to. That's the total score they get for the entire module. Or you can just show them the score, all of the answers, or only those that they got correct, or the correct response and those that they submitted. You can choose to show them the feedback that you've entered, the incorrect and the correct response feedbacks, and you can show incorrect questions, so only display to the students the questions that they got wrong. You can show that after they've submitted, one time only view on a specific date, after the due date and time, which is obviously up here, or after availability end, or after all attempts have been graded. So you need to very carefully look through these options. The last option in here, before I go back to the exceptions, is how the test is presented to the students. You can display all of the questions at once if there are not too many, but if you have quite a few, you can actually show them one at a time. If they are progressive, in other words, question 3 might present information that would have allowed them to answer question 2, but you don't want them to see it till they've completed question 2, you can say prohibit backtracking. So as soon as they've finished question 1, then they go to question 2, they cannot go back and try and change question 1. The last option on here is randomizing questions. This is great, especially if you're in something like the IT suite where the computers are sat quite close to one another. It means that the order that the student sees the questions will be different to the person sat next to them. So I might be displayed questions in the order of 4, 1, 3, 2, 5. The next person might actually see them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It means that if I look over and see, oh, they're on question 3 and they've selected the second option down, that's going to be nothing to me, because question 3 to me is something very, very different to the person sat next to me, or randomly should be. So if I go back up here to the test availability exceptions, this is where you can define different rules for different students, and this is usually around students who are permitted extra time or are doing the test on a different date and time. To do that, you need to add the user or group first of all, and it will display all of your students to you. And you click submit here. and you then have the options that you can change for the student. So we set up here that we're allowing unlimited attempts, but actually I can actually say that I only want Pete Lonsdale to be able to do 1 attempt. He's good enough, he should get this on the first go. And I could say, actually, I only want to give him 5 minutes for this, and then it's going to auto-submit. But I could actually say that instead of the 60 minutes, I want to give him 120, that he needs extra time to do this. Again, we can change the availability to a different date and time, and we can say whether or not we're forcing completion for this individual person. If you want to get rid of any of these, there is the button on the right hand side there to delete them, but you can add in as many people as you like, and each of them can have a different set of options set for them. Once you set everything up as you would like it, click the submit button at the bottom, and depending on the settings you've chosen, it'll either become available to the students now or on the date that you've set. We can see here that the test is now available. And if I just go into it very, very quickly just to show you, we get the password here, which is happy, and we've gone into the test. You can see here, because I said that prohibit backtracking, that it's warning the students that if they go to the next question, they can't come back to this one here. Okay. The last thing I'm going to show you before going into the Grade Centre very, very quickly, I'm just going to go back into tests, surveys and pools. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is, how do I copy this test into another module? The way that you do that is actually export the test from inside here. So if I wanted to take the one that we're doing now, I could click on the drop-down menu, and I could export that to the local computer, which is the best option to do. That gives you a zip file to download to your computer. When you go into the new module, click the import test, and this here allows you to select the zip file from your computer and import it, and it will then appear in your list of tests that are available there. It's a very, very simple process to do. The only other thing that I'll show you in here, which I did say I'd come back to, is if you had to deploy the test in several areas, just use the copy button there. That will make a duplicate copy of your test, and it will just place a number 1 after it, or number 2 if there's already a number 1 there. So just wait for the page to refresh. There you go. We've now got 2 copies of this test. This one here obviously deployed because we have deployed it, and this one here isn't. So it's now deployable elsewhere inside the module.
Just something to note there in terms of the test export. Tim, you use Chrome on your Mac, so you've probably never come across this issue. If you use Safari on a Mac, when you download a zip file, the default setting is that it helpfully, or it's trying to be helpful anyway, it unzips that file for you. Even if you then rezip that file, BlackBoard won't import it as a test. So if you're using Safari, you need to turn off the function that automatically unzips files for you. Otherwise, you struggle to move tests between modules. That's something we can help you with if you need more pointers on that.
Okay. Any of the other presenters have any comments before we move to the Grade Centre?
Yeah, I was going to say that extra time feature is quite a new feature, so people might not be aware of it.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the Grade Centre. So we're now assuming that our lovely students have gone in and completed their test, and we have under the course management menu on the left-hand side here the Grade Centre, and you have the full Grade Centre. You have a section for needs marking. If your test isn't self-marking, you will find them inside there. But you have the full Grade Centre, which will show you every test and survey, every Turnitin assignment as well, is placed inside there. But you have some smart views as well. Assignments and tests are pre-populated smart views, and you can create more yourself. And a smart view allows you to only display certain columns that you wish to display. We're not going to cover those today, but that's just to let you know what is possible inside the Grade Centre. So I'm going to go to the full grade centre, and we should see our two students in here, Pete and Matt, who very helpfully sat an exam for me earlier on today. And we can see here that the class reset test has its own column. We can see that the column for the demo that we've just created is already there as well. The first thing that I'll show you is if we don't want to show this column to the students, so we don't want them to see their scores, we can click from the drop-down menu and go to Show Hide to Users, so we can hide that from the users. It is a known bug that you have to come in and do this. It may be something that's coming in an update. Jonathan can maybe let us know a bit later on whether or not that is going to be an update that's fixed over the summer. So you can see here this symbol here indicates that it's not visible to the students. We can see here under the class reset that Pete scored 3 and Matt West scored 9.
I wasn't trying.
So he says, okay. But we can reorder this column here just by clicking on the header, and we can change it into the orders. A good way of doing this as well is it will group the people who have not yet taken the test, so you can very quickly see a list of people who have not undertaken your test. And we're going to have a look first of all at marking an assignment. So I'm going to go into one of these, even though they've been self-marked. I'm going to go into one of these and just show you how you would mark it if necessary. So you click on the drop-down menu here and you go into the attempt if you want to mark an individual's. If you want to mark everybody's as a whole, you click on the header, the column header drop-down menu, and you can go into grade attempts, or you can go into grade anonymously if you are required to anonymously grade the submissions. So I'm going to go into grade attempts here, and we'll just wait for the page to reload. And we've been taken into the first attempt here, which is by Matt, and we can see all of these questions here he has got correct.
I was trying.
We can choose on the right hand side here to enter in a different point value if we decide that actually this question here, for example, where he got it wrong, we could decide that on ratification that the option there, it wasn't quite clear enough and we need to award extra marks to the students, and we can enter in a different mark there. If there were textual responses in here, you'd be given additional options which are very clearly labelled for marking the students' textual submissions. At the bottom here, you have the ability to feedback information to the users and also record some notes about the grading that's been going on as well. Once you've done that, you can either save and go to the next submission to mark that one, or you can just go save and exit. The exit button there would just take you out without saving any of the changes you've made. The last way of grading is to go into grade questions here. This allows you to do all of the questions at the same time. So in here, if I select the top question here about the Data Protection Act, you can see that Pete Lonsdale got it correct, and so did Matthew West, but I could edit their scores separately. So you're only dealing with one question, but seeing everybody's responses at the same time. And that will help you to give a uniform marking schema to, say, essay-type questions. So I'm just going to go back out to the full grade centre here. The next question that we get asked a lot is, how do we display this as a percentage to the students? Okay, 9, 3, but what's that as a percentage grade? There's a very simple way of doing this. From the column header, click the drop-down menu and go into Edit Column Information. Inside here, you've got a lot of options for how the information is displayed inside the grade centre. Primarily, you're displaying the score, but you have the option of displaying secondary as well. This is really useful to drop down and just change to percentage. If you're allowing multiple attempts, you can also change what is displayed. Is it the last attempt that they've made, the highest they get, the lowest they get, or the first they've made? You can also display an average of all of their attempts. Once you've made that secondary display change, just click the Submit button at the bottom. And when the page refreshes and goes back to the full grade center, you can now see that we have 9.00 as the score, and in brackets 90%. If you need to download this data, you can by clicking the drop-down menu again on the column header, and you have the ability to download the results here. This will download a raw Excel spreadsheet which has a lot of extra information in it other than just the responses. So it does take a bit of getting used to. Again, if anybody is requiring to download the results to do some analysis, then talk to any of the presenters here today, and we will walk you through how to actually declutter that information and then run some analysis on them. The other question we get asked is usually when students submit a test or a survey too early and they want to go back and redo it. If they're allowed to do so, you need to be able to remove their attempt. To do that, click on the drop-down menu next to the person's attempt and go into the View Grade Details. And when the page refreshes, it will show you the number of attempts that the person has undertaken and the ability to clear the attempt. When you do this here, it tells you that it cannot be undone. So as soon as you've cleared it, it's gone. When you go back to the full grade center, you'll notice that the student then has no submission inside there. If it's a single attempt test, they'll now be able to go back in, depending on the availability options, and to retake that test. So that's pretty much all we're going to show you today. We're running close to the end of the session. We've not had any questions posted so far. If anybody has any questions, please post them in now. But I'm also going to ask the presenters if there's anything else that anyone would like to comment on or for me to demonstrate.
I can't think of anything to add to that, Tim. I think that's been a good coverage of the basics.
I have taken a look at the version we're going to install in the summer, and this one does have some options for showing when the test results actually appear. So you do get this option here for when they see and what they see at any particular time, and you can set 2 rules up, so you can decide that they can see a certain amount before the test is finished, and then
This is
you can set an option for afterwards.
Moment, John. These are the same options that we've currently got, but there is the bug that even if you deselect all of the options, they're still displayed in the grade center to the student.
Hopefully they fix that bug. That's still, I mean, that's something we update continuously, so it should be fixed shortly, hopefully.
So if I just go back to my screen, there was one other thing I was going to show, which I've just been reminded about, which is this here. This is how the students use it in My Grade section. So if at the top of their Blackboard they go and click on the section where their name is, there's a little drop-down menu there, and they click on the symbol there, which is the My Grades. They'll be able to see in here a list of the tests they have undertaken or need to undertake, and the grades that they've been presented with. Again, depending on the options, they may be able to click on the title of the test and go in and see the questions that they got right, got wrong, and any of the other options that you displayed to them.
Thank you for that, Tim. It's Matt here. Just to let you know that I think when as the summer progresses and we move towards the next version, we'll be putting up more of these short, sort of sharp webinars to show people around the new features. And anything that Jonathan has just mentioned recently, just then, we'll get something up online for it. But thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So just to remind viewers, we do have another webinar tomorrow at 12:30, which will be covering Google Drive and Google Docs, looking at how you will be able to work online in Word documents, in text documents, and to share files, work collaboratively. So if you're available at 12:30 tomorrow and are interested in those, please come along and join us for that. Thank you for those that have stayed with us for the duration. The video recording for this will be made available later on. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to contact any of us. Again, I'm Tim Smale, e-learning fellow from the Faculty of Health. We have Pete Lonsdale from the School of Nursing and Midwifery. We have Matthew West from the LPDC and Jonathan Knight from IT Services. Thank you very much.